Okay, so the next thing that I'd like to talk about is space exploration. And space exploration is where we will see some exciting developments in the 2020s. Now, your immediate thoughts are probably, are we going to go back to the moon with NASA and some of the other space agencies and probably get to Mars? What I'm referring to, or what I will talk about, is actually something a little bit different. Yes, the government-led or nation-state-led exploration of space, which focuses more on just making these breakthroughs and doing scientific experiments, that will continue. But what we'll start to see in the 2020s is a greater push for commercial space exploration, as well as space mining, commerce in space, or commercial activities in space. Now, we're very close to having the resources to be able to do this. There are companies like SpaceX and Boeing, which are designing their rockets. In fact, both of those are actually going to become suppliers to the likes of NASA. And that's good. You want this capability outside of a few government organizations. But the big impact to society, and what's very exciting, is space mining, space industry, space manufacturing. So let's talk a little bit about what that brings to the table, and I think we will see this in the 2020s. Let's start with space mining. So the amount of natural resources in space, on the moon and on various asteroids, it's orders of magnitude more than what we see on the planet. Let's take gold, for example. Scientists have found asteroids where the amount of gold on one asteroid is significantly more than the entirety of gold that we have on the planet Earth. Now, while this may sound appealing to some people in terms of getting rich, it's not about getting rich. Yes, the first person who carries off successful space mining will bring all of this to the planet Earth, and he will be very rich. Space mining will give us probably the first trillionaire on the planet, because that's how big the opportunity is for space mining. But then what will happen is that the gold price will collapse, because now the supply has just shot up, and probably Bitcoin will become gold 2.0. There's only 21 million Bitcoins at a maximum. Some of those have been lost. So that's probably what will happen. That won't happen in the 2020s, though. I think that's going to be a little bit further. We'll start to see the early phases of space mining, the infrastructure being put down in the 2020s. It's more exciting in terms of other resources that help us develop as a civilization. Now, materials, rare metals, even iron. Iron is a rare metal on planet Earth, and we could manufacture a lot more if we had abundant supply. There's rare earth metals. There's things like thorium. Thorium is proposed as a form of energy going forward, and there's only very few thorium deposits on the planet. I know that there's some in southern India. I was reading about that. So there's an abundance of materials in space that could help us develop as a society. The other thing is water. If we find water resources in the solar system and fuel, this will help us become a spacefaring civilization. And we need to make sure that we're on top of this now. You're not going to see manned missions to Mars, certainly not in a big way, without this being sorted out. This infrastructure, the ability to go and find water somewhere else, quickly take it to Mars if we do create a base there, even the moon, right? So that's the first phase. The second phase then is around the industrialization of space. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, firstly, there's something called space manufacturing. Space manufacturing basically involves manufacturing in a zero-G environment, free from contaminants, free from the pull of gravity, where certain types of manufacturing can be done, Think of chip fabs where it's very, very sensitive, more to dust and contaminants and pollutants, but there will be other types of manufacturing that are sensitive to gravity. Some of these processes will just work better in a zero-G environment, and that's actually coming. So that's going to be an entire industry in space coming very soon. We'll start seeing it being talked of in the 2020s, and maybe by the end of the decade, we'll see the likes of NASA go to the moon. I'm not sure if we'll get the first man on Mars in the 2020s. That's difficult to predict. That'll probably happen in the 2030s. But you'll start seeing the infrastructure for space mining and space manufacturing being spoken of and put down in the 2020s. I think that's a fairly safe bet. And that will have a massive impact to society. Materials are not a problem anymore. Materials that were rare will become more abundant. The valuable materials will drop in value. Few people will be unhappy about that, but for a civilization as a whole, that's actually good news. That's something we want to see. And then more scientific discoveries will be made as we have access to these materials in abundance. So you will see multiple knock-on effects of being able to mine these materials, manufacture in zero-G, conduct scientific experiments in those labs in zero-G. I think you will see a time where there'll be an explosion in science labs, both in Earth orbit and probably in the moon orbit or a moon base. And I think NASA has spoken of starting to create a moon base in the 2020s. By the way, I've looked at NASA's plans for how we will go back to the moon. And you remember in the 1960s, we had 3 astronauts go to the moon. One of them remained in orbit because all 3 of them couldn't land. Somebody had to be there monitoring the situation, and they had limited fuel just to blast off the moon's surface and reattach to the ship that was orbiting the moon. And that ship, which never landed, it orbited the moon, carried the crew back home. That was the only way to do it. Now, the new proposal, which I've looked at, they want to have a permanent base orbiting the moon. So you will travel from the Earth to the moon base, which is an orbit. You will then have a lander from there, landing on the moon, coming back to the base, and then your ship will depart back to the Earth. So that's a key step. And that's going to be your moon base, not on the surface, but orbiting the moon. And I'm not sure if we're going to get that in the 2020s, but we might. We might, if all goes well, see that in the 2020s. Scientific experiments there. Now, third parties are probably going to do the same. There will be a host of third parties saying, we will also put a little space station orbiting the moon. And it's good because if something goes wrong on the NASA space station, you've got a third party there as backup, and they will have resources, capabilities. So it's very, very good. Space networks is going to be another thing, because you're going to want much better communication between all these bases, either in Earth orbit and moon orbit, than we had previously. Remember, you have long times, you have communication delays of minutes. So that's another industry. There's going to be a whole bunch of industries where entrepreneurs can take advantage of from space as a whole. My prediction for the 2020s is that all of these will start in this decade, either being spoken of, conceptualized, visualized, and some of them actually start being built. Okay, so space exploration in the 2020s is finally going to get very, very exciting. We've had a bit of a lull. I think the space shuttle disasters really set us back. And I think the moon landings, people ask, well, we landed in the moon in 1969, we went back in the 70s. Why didn't we make better progress? And I think we really punched above our weight. We really achieved more than we should have with very limited technologies, bit of luck as well. And now we're going to make a real push as a civilization into space. So space in the 2020s, I predict, is going to be hugely exciting. That's good news if you're a fan of space.